Hey everyone, this is part two of our advice for early widowhood.
So one thing that we were chatting about is just to remember that your brain is going to do some pretty funny things. If you've suffered a big loss, and if you've experienced trauma during that big loss, especially, your brain is almost as if you've been in a real good car wreck, and it is just not going to work the way that you want it to, unfortunately. Widow brain is real. And I mean, people talk a lot about the forgetfulness, and that is certainly a part of it. And I'm sure some folks have some great advice for, how to try to tackle that. But also remember, some of the things that you're going to go through are, for example, I could not call the cable company until I manically found every piece of chapstick that he had hidden all over the house, because I just could not be surprised and sad at finding his chapstick one more time. And I had this laser focus for hours. And then, of course, I was exhausted and I could never call the cable company. Just understanding your brain's going to work a little different for probably quite a while. And it's going to work different than people that aren't new widows.
I think I was in that fog for so long with my brain working differently. And while your brain is working differently, you're still going to find yourself triggered by things that you can't anticipate. My first trigger was that day opening the refrigerator and seeing the leftovers of food that he had made and not understanding how they could be there and he wasn't. The strangest trigger I had, the strangest one was I was driving and saw these tail lights on a car that I had meant to tell him about because they were so unusual. And I lost it while driving because of these tail lights. And so my advice in this thing, two things. I find as a widow that when I'm hit with a trigger, I stop breathing, I hold my breath, and I can't, it sounds silly to say breathe, but if you're like me, then you're going to be holding your breath a whole lot more as a widow. And the other thing is, your car is a great place to scream, and your car is a great place to yell. And if there's no one else in your car, scream as loud as you can and cry as loud as you want and get it out. Do it as much as you need because it's so hard. It's so hard. And breathe.
I love that, Kelly. The car is the place where I have my best cries too. That's nice to share. I was gonna say, for me, I was someone who just wanted to move through all of the tasks as quickly as I could because I think it provided me comfort to feel like I was executing tasks. So I wasn't a person that would have was able to pace myself like Kim said earlier in the first video. And so for me, what was helpful was trying to remember to find time every day to do something joyful or something happy. And that sounds so ridiculous and sort of, cheesy to find joy in the worst days of your life. But I have a 4-year-old son, and it was really easy for me to get bogged down in sort of the paperwork and the tasks that I had to get through and forget to play with him or get on the floor and sit with him or even watch a television show with him. And so just being really intentional to take some time to put my brain into a different space than this solving problem space was really important for me. And doing that sort of intentionally in a planful way was something that helped me move out of that space, because I think I needed help keeping my brain doing different things so that it didn't perseverate on the same things all the time.
So I'm going to say you may have noticed that the five of us sometimes offer advice that may seem inconsistent, and that's because there is no a way to do this. There is your way to do this, and it may change, right? What you need, or the approach that you take, or how it's feeling may be different 5 months in than it was 2 months in, may be different 8 months in than it was 5 months in. So I think it's a chance for you to kind of get in touch with your intuition, is how I put it, in a way that you might not pay attention to in other times. You just have to kind of feel your way through. Your body's going to tell you a lot of what it is that you need. So even though our advice might be inconsistent, that's what it was. It was advice. And maybe you can find what you need among what we've had to say.
One of the things that really helped me was that I got a notebook and I wrote everything down, and I kept this with me, like wherever I went. If I had to go somewhere, this was in my purse, because you're going to have a lot of information thrown at you. There's a lot of tasks, and as we mentioned, like not everything has to be done all at once, but I just wrote it all down because looking back, I'm 9 months out, and there is a lot that I don't even remember happening in those first months because your brain is so foggy and there's so much happening. And the other thing that my notebook has been helpful for is, especially at night, I noticed I would be like, that's kind of, a lot of people feel that's when the grief hits you the hardest, is at night. And you start getting that tape recorder brain where everything is just going on and on in your head. And I found that it helped to just write it down in my journal, because the act of like putting it on the page, somehow that helped me to kind of quiet my brain a little bit. Like I was setting it aside, at least for the time being. And then the last thing I just wanted to add is that I had a mantra that I would tell myself when things are really, really hard, and they are going to be really, really hard. But I would tell myself, it will not always feel the way it does today, and just remind myself of that.
Something I wanted to follow up on is about, Janice, what you said about being kind and all of these things, is just understand that you're going to do things wildly different from everybody else, and that's okay. I mean, even in this group, I know widows that didn't touch their person's things for like 2 years. I packed everything up on day 3. And that sounds crazy when I tell most widows that, and it is, but it is what I needed to do. Just as Janice was saying about the tape recorder, there are going to be things that you beat yourself up about or other people beat you up about. They weren't there. They didn't have to make that decision. Find your little methods to kind of turn that tape recorder off at night, because this is hard and there is zero perfect way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the most helpful things that my therapist told me early on was like, instead of analyzing my behavior with judgment and this way of saying like, God, why am I so tired all the time? Or like, I had a day where I couldn't get off the couch. What's wrong with me? Like, to sort of flip that question around like, to say, for example, why does my body need to rest so much today? Or why did I need to make these decisions in this order? Or what about my grief is making me want to put all of my husband's stuff away now? And so instead of sort of having judgment about myself, just trying to understand the roots of that with kindness and using that to help me move forward in my grief. And that was just like a really fundamental, huge world shift for me that I'm still working on, but that was not natural to me even before my husband died. And so to try to think that way about my body and to try to be really generous about what I needed was really helpful during a time when I frankly needed a lot.